All right. I don't know how this hasn't happened before, but it's happening now. He's at the Athletic. He's at Stadium. What other gigs do you have, Shams?
Just those two for now. But obviously, during the pandemic, I've been pretty busy. Just appearing on networks. I didn't like CNN and CNBC. So, but just those two right now.
I have a lot to cover. I want to start here. Do you think this NBA season is actually going to happen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's definitely going to get off the ground. All the planning preparation has been put into place for this to happen. Like there's, all these protocols. Everyone around the league that I speak to, it's all systems go. Now, are there going to be things put into place if there are a rash amount of positive tests or an outbreak occurs? I think the league does that. It does have that in the back of their minds and is mentally aware that that is a possibility. I think even Adam Silver has said it publicly. He's talked to people privately about it. But everything as of right now is it's all systems go.
Well, you talk to a lot of people. Are you sensing a growing apprehension as the COVID cases spike around the country and especially in Florida?
I've been feeling that for weeks, though. There have been swaths of players, coaches, executives that have had kind of this growing uncertainty about it. But again, the fact that the vast majority of players want to play, LeBron James has been vocal that he wants to play. Yanis wants to play. So you have a lot of these star players. Kawhi Leonard, as long as things are safe and, given all the other leagues right now, the NBA is the only league to have this, fully daily testing protocol set up. You see the MLB, you have different players coming out saying like, listen, we're not getting the daily testing that we need. I saw Chris Bryant said the other day, like, I've been tested in 5-6 days. That's not happening in the NBA. Like these guys are getting tested daily. I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing like, over 24 positive tests. I know even in the last several days, obviously these guys results are private, them it being released is really their decision. But there have been players even in the last 4 or 5 days, a good amount of players that have tested positive as well. And so the NBA is treating it as, Chris Paul, Michelle Roberts. When you hear them speak publicly and privately, I mean, it is kind of like trying to treat it like an injury because that's where they're at right now, in terms of trying to restart this NBA.
Do you believe the official number of positive tests versus what the actual number is? Because I've heard it's closer to triple figures than maybe they're admitting.
I mean, I think the last thing that the NBA announced was 25. I don't think that I don't think that they're falsifying that. Now, since that 25 came out on Friday, I do know there have been several others that have tested positive, which I'm sure reflect on, the next announcement that the NBA does make and reveal the teams as far as positive testing. But again, it's not, you don't have, a bunch of teams dealing with it, but there are several teams that are going to, going into Orlando, I'm told, that are not going to be traveling with their full complement of players. Like, there's a group of 3, 4, 5 players that are going to have to stay back to make sure that you comply with testing protocols.
What's your responsibility as a reporter? Because you obviously have incredible access to information and you have to vet what you put out there versus what you kind of tuck away. There's stuff maybe you find out that isn't supposed to be public. And in this case, if somebody's test positive and they don't want anybody to know, then it's their right for nobody to know. So have you stumbled? I mean, you don't say what you've stumbled across, but you must hear things that you just can't act on at all, right?
Yeah, I mean, but again, I think that's just the nature of the beast, especially right now, right? Like coronavirus isn't, a torn ACL or an injury. Like I've had different people say that to me, and that is true. And you have to respect the player. I
Yeah.
think early on, when Rudy Gobert tested positive, Kevin Durant, different guys around the league, Donovan Mitchell, it was such a shock. We in America, not forget the NBA, but I feel like in America, period. I remember that night. You had Tom Hanks, his wife test positive. And then within 30 minutes, Rudy Gobert tested positive. And, the crazy thing about the Rudy Gobert situation is, again, the league, basically that game was suspended, right? There was so much chaos at the beginning of that Thunder Jazz game. And I remember I heard exactly at like 7 p.m. Central Time that, hey, a Jazz player tested positive. It was Rudy Gobert. And I didn't report it until 8:27 my time. I believe that was the time. And so that's an hour and 27 minutes that went by. And Bill, in like breaking news, an hour and 27 minutes, is a long time, but that time was being spent, like you don't go into journalism school or, what I do or what I try to do when I try to master in terms of, reporting and building relationships. You don't go into it reporting on viruses
Yeah.
and pandemics. And so it was such a newness to it. And so there's so many different factors so many legal bridges you had to cross. And I think there was such a newness at first to where, okay, when you have the information, you can try to report it as delicately as possible. But obviously now, you know, the player's privacy, I think, is so important with this situation. So it happens all the time where, you have, I feel like over the last 2-3 weeks where, that, player X has tested positive. But again, if it's his right at the end of the day, if he wants the information known, him and his camp.
So, look, going back to March 11th, which I think officially has become a date. Like if I hear the March 11th, I think of Gobert, Tom Hanks
Me
being
too.
in my back
Me
house
too.
watching basketball, and all of a sudden the OKC game's getting canceled and just pure chaos. Did you have a sense even before that night that things were headed that way? Because like Spotify had shut down its offices 36 hours before that. People, bigger companies weren't comfortable with their employees traveling. We didn't let our people go to the Sloan conference and stuff like that. So there was a sense something bad was happening. Were you kind of waiting for a night like that, or were you just hoping it wasn't going to happen?
I was probably hoping it wasn't going to happen. Like, I think there were a lot of things that were trending that way, like that previous Friday. So that happened on a Wednesday, right? But that previous Friday, NBA teams got a memo real late at night on a Friday night. NBA games were going on national TV, ESPN, and teams got a memo real late saying, like, basically start preparing for the possibility of no fans. So it's kind of like a late Friday night, just, kind of not buried memo, because again, the NBA is 24/7. They're always working. And so they kind of pushed that out to teams late on a Friday night. And I think that was for me the moment when the wheels started turning, like, yo, this is serious. And this isn't, and again, I heard about the coronavirus really in December, January, just because the players in China were being affected. The American players that were playing the CBA were being affected by it. But I'll admit, I don't think I took it as seriously as probably I needed to in the moment. And but I think that's where the wheels started getting turned. And then that day on Wednesday, I was told that Rudy ended up, he was taking the coronavirus test, and I knew that afternoon. But again, Bill, you go into it and you're like, all right, listen, he'll test negative. It'll come back. We'll just continue playing on as usual. And then what happens, and everything from there. It's been obviously history.
It looking back now, I mean, it's been almost 4 months. How fast it went from that weekend to that Wednesday, which is only 4 days, and it feels like a whole lifetime. I mean, my family went to, I think, 2 Clipper games that weekend, and it was like, should I worry about them at Staples? And then now you look back, you're like, "Oh my god, what was I doing?" And I look forward to looking ahead to where this season is going. We're not gonna have fans in the bubble, but even next year, I know the teams are just completely flummoxed trying to figure out what are we gonna do? Like, even if let's say the bubble works and it pays off and we end up getting a champion and we get out of there with minimum hiccups, hopefully. They still have to start the next season probably around Christmas, and none of these teams have any idea if they're gonna have fans. What have you heard on that?
Yeah, so I reported it a few weeks ago. On that Kyrie Irving call, it had several different NBPA members, right? You had Garrett Temple, Chris Paul, and a couple of them said point blank, like, us as the NBPA leadership, we're expecting there to be no fans all of 2021. So players are braced for no fans all of next season. And Adam Silver said on a players call, I think about 2 months ago, if I remember, I think in May sometime, that basically fans are 40% of the revenue for the NBA. So how are they
Yeah.
going to replace 40% of the revenue that comes from fans, punching their tickets in to each and every game and everything else that comes with that? I don't know. And I think Adam Silver is trying to figure it out. I think he will have some solutions for at least part of that 40%. The question is how much of that 40% will be equated for, because that's a lot of money, Bill, that's going to be left on the table, if they play without fans next year. And it's going to show in terms of the salary cap.
And it's the league that probably has the hardest time figuring out how to account for an unknown variable like that. Like baseball, whatever, the luxury tax gets affected. Football, they have so many players. The best players are prone to stay where they are for the most part. Basketball has turned into this sport where, you really only have 3 or 4 guys that matter on every team. They're all on contracts that are 4 years or less. There's incredible turnover. And now we have a cap situation where I look at like Giannis. Giannis could be a
Right.
free agent summer 2021. Well, if the cap is 40 to 45% less than what it is, how is he going to jump teams? How is a team even going to have the cap space to offer him? So it seemed like for somebody like him, he's almost stuck in Milwaukee unless they come up with new CBA language to be like, all right, so the cap's this, but you can actually do this. Have you heard anything on that, or they're not even thinking about that yet?
No, it's tough to think about the CBA, but I mean, listen, players know that there is a good possibility that they're going to have to redo different parts of the CBA. That's just like, I
Yeah.
mean, that's just an inevitability. Like they're going to have to, restructure different elements of it. And I don't know if they're going to completely rip it up, but they're going to need to go back and really account for everything that's going to have to take place here during this time period. If the season completes, hopefully for the league, it does complete. And then
Yeah.
around September, October, you have an idea of what the salary cap will be next year. And, the one thing I know is the NBPA, the players do not want the salary cap to go from, it's a 109 projection, I believe, for next season. They don't want that to go from like 109 to 90 or 95. They're going to fight for it
Or
to be in
80.
that. Yeah,
I mean,
or 80.
it could
Yeah.
go way lower than that. It could be the opposite of what happened in 2016.
They do not want that. So if it can go, I mean, again, this is just me throwing numbers like 105, 100. If they can keep it within a range that it's not that much of a decrease, that's what they're going to be going for. So that will have an impact over next year and beyond. But the players, they don't want that large deficit in terms of their salary cap for next year. But again, this is going to be something that will be known more into September. That's why it is important for them to finish out this year, account for
Yeah.
the revenue, finish off the season.
My guess is that they're gonna have some version of the amnesty clause, but it'll be like the bizarre amnesty clause where it'll be like every team, one superstar just doesn't count against the cap. So the cap will be, I don't know, 75, 80 million, whatever. But each team can designate one guy who just doesn't count at all. So, like for the Celtics, Kemba makes, I don't know, 30, something like that. So the Celtics would just designate Kemba. You would just remove him from the cap, and then the cap would be for the other guys on the team. And I think that's what you would have to do. And they've done the reverse of it with the amnesty, right? They did the amnesty clause a couple times to try to give relief. I think they would have to do the reverse of that, and then that would inadvertently help teams keep their own players too, I think. They did it
That
correctly.
would
I've heard a
that would
little buzz
definitely
on that,
alleviate.
but yeah,
Yeah,
so
I haven't heard that yet, but I mean, I'm sure the NBA is looking for any ideas in terms of like how to move forward. But like that's something I hadn't heard. But I mean, it would probably be a wise move, in different elements. But I mean, again, like next year seems so far off, and
oh my
and
god.
again, like I get questions asked at different points about like what's the salary cap looking like next year. But I think now everyone realizes like they need to finish off the season, see what the revenue looks like off this season, and then really go from there in terms of how do we change the CBA? How do we manufacture what the next salary cap will look like? There's so many unanswered questions.
So, I felt like this was a mistake at the time, and I think it's becoming a bigger mistake that they have too many teams in this bubble. And to go with 22, I thought they should have done 12 or 13. Basically, the top 6 in each conference plus Dallas, and maybe you figure out some mechanism where I don't know how they would have done it with Dallas. Maybe there's like a playoff with the 5, 6, 7 seeds in that conference. 2 of them get to go, whatever. And they keep adding these teams. Now we found out today, like Bradley Beal's not going. You have these completely depleted teams. You had Aldridge deciding to get surgery. You have the Nets are just decimated. This seems dumb to me. It seems dumb to me that we're doing 22. Was there ever a world in which there was going to be 12 or 14 teams instead of 22? And why did they settle on 22? What do you think the reason was?
Yeah, it was never going to be that low, Bill. But I know there were a lot of GMs around the league wanted 16. Like that was the cleanest, easiest way to just go into this bubble, right? Just do the 16 teams. But again, like in terms of accounting for the financial aspect of this, 16 teams wasn't going to bring the revenue that 20 or 22 would, and all 30 teams obviously did not make sense from a health and safety standpoint. So that's why the NBA decided on 22. 20 would have meant group play. But listen, I've had GMs tell me, like, what if they just did basically what they did with the 22 teams and just did it for 20 teams and leave out, Phoenix or Washington. But, from what I'm told, ownership levels of both Washington and Phoenix push for their teams to be in. And now
Yeah.
you look at it, Phoenix, obviously they're really, I guess they have a puncher's chance. And
Yeah.
Washington, without Bradley Beal, you're already 6 games out. I
And
mean, that
Bertans.
and Bertans out, even without, Spencer Dinwiddie, DeAndre Jordan, maybe one or two more players, like the Nets, still have a 6-game lead. It'll be tough to see them not hold on to that spot, especially given the fact that Brad Beal's out. So if you're Adam Silver, like, your reverse response could have been like, hey, Washington, if John Wall, Brad Beal play, I got you guys. You guys are in. But if they're not coming to the table, like, why should I bring you? Again, those guys, they still were brought into this. So definitely there are still some lingering questions. That's why you had a team like Portland. They voted no for the entire structure. And that had to do with, Portland ownership, the players all believing that 22 teams isn't the way to go. We should go with 20. But the league and also, listen, I do believe Adam Silver did talk to the majority of teams, and the
Yeah.
majority wanted as many teams as possible. And if 30 wasn't going to be the route, 22 teams definitely. I mean, obviously, 29 of 30 teams voted for that.
So you think the players driving this, and I was waiting for the players to get involved, and then they finally did in a big way. LeBron, Chris Paul are the guys people know, the superstars that are really pushing this. Who are like the next 3 guys? Who are if you had to do your starting 5 of the guys with the most influence and power, who everybody else is kind of following what they do, who are the other 3 with LeBron and Chris?
Great question. I'm stumped on this one. um,
So maybe it's just those 2.
yeah, I mean, listen, Chris Paul has definitely been a big driving force in terms of communication. I'm trying to think back at some of the players that I know have also advocated. I mean,
Like,
listen, Garrett Temple.
does Giannis have a voice or no?
I think Giannis made it clear early in the hiatus that he wanted to play, and as long as it was safe. Again, there was always that caveat. As long as
Yeah.
it's safe, we want to play. So I think Giannis made that known early. But I'm
So
trying to think,
Garrett
like,
Temple, you think, huh?
Garrett Temple has been very. I mean, in a way, in terms of trying to educate players, in his mind, trying to educate players in terms of, like, the financial component of this and what it means. He's obviously VP of the NBPA, which is a position that your boy Kyrie Irving has as well. And so
My
him
boy.
and Kyrie share that position. And so Garrett has
Right.
definitely been very vocal in terms of, trying to educate players. On that call that Kyrie had, Garrett, Chris Paul, these guys were vocal about, what it would mean to not play. And I think CJ McCollum, is a guy that has had both ends of the spectrum. I mean, I know at one point, he was toward not playing. Then at another point, he wanted to play. But through it all, just talking to other players, he's been very educating, and he's been bringing a very level head to this argument. So I think, I guess if I have a 4 group for you, I mean, I guess it's those 4.
Yeah.
But again, like, LeBron's impact is more from a vocal, subtle standpoint. It's not from I'm involved with Chris Paul and we're talking with the PA on a daily basis. From what I'm told, like, LeBron James, if he wants to talk to Adam Silver, he'll talk to Adam Silver directly. If he wants to talk to Chris Paul, he'll talk to Chris Paul directly.
Right. Were you on the Zoom call that Kyrie had, or were you just getting all the information literally as it was being said on the infamous Zoom call?
Yeah, I can't be on those calls. I'm not allowed. So I definitely was not on that. But,
You had
obviously
amazing
my
info.
job. It's my job to report. And, I tried to just paint the most accurate picture off that call. And, I saw what JJ said on your last podcast. And so I guess I'll take the honor, but I was not on that call.
Were you expecting that from Kyrie? Because he had been on the calls the week before, and from what I heard, hadn't said that much, and then I guess they let him talk at the tail end, but, something happened over that 6 days where he became a lot more active. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so on that call with the PA, Kyrie Irving basically asked, what is the Players Association and the league doing in terms of sponsorship deals, right? Like, what are we doing in terms of trying to get partnership and endorsements, right? It was a very specific question, and his tone, from what I'm told, like he was challenging, like Michelle Robertson, Chris Paul, like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And then throughout all that, he also was talking to a group of players, Avery Bradley, Dwight Howard, several other guys, about a dozen guys, about not playing, about the possibility of unifying and trying to see if there is a way for a group of players to unify. And that was going on at the same time. And so Kyrie Irving was leading a lot of those calls. So that Friday call, when that took place, that was a buildup of like two or 3 weeks. And there was a Zoom call earlier that week that didn't have as many players. Like that Zoom call on that Friday had about 85 players at most, right? But earlier in the week, they had about a couple dozen players on that call. So it kind of grew, and they brought in some outsiders on that call, and that really was Kyrie's opportunity to speak up, and he did, and there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of opinions shared. I thought it was. I thought it was. I thought it was good for them. I thought it was.
I
I thought it
agree.
was productive. I think you need to be open and honest with each other. At one point, I was told Russell Westbrook said on the call, like, I'm all for sitting out. I'm all for, seeing what we can do to unify. But guys, we need to have a plan. And if our best plan is by playing, and at the end of the day, we're the players. Like, we have an obligation, and at the end of the day, we have a voice in the bubble, and we're gonna have a voice to make change. Like, we need to have a plan. If our plan is to play, like, I want to play too. So it was opinions like that where you see both ends of the spectrum.
And it seems like we're headed toward everybody agreeing on some sort of plan for how to protest in the bubble in different kind of ways, or at least get different messages out, I should say. Um, who's leading that process, and have you heard that it's going smoothly? Because from everything I've heard, it's gone pretty smoothly.
Yeah, it's. I feel like it's gone smooth, but again, this is, and I heard this early. This is going to be the NBA listening to the players.
Right.
This is going to be the NBA just really giving the NBPA an opportunity to just give them different opportunities, give them different opinions. Obviously, the Black Lives Matter opinion on the court. I reported a couple weekends ago, like the NBPA pushed for different jersey names on the back, which will go into effect. I'm told there will be warm-up shirts for the movement as
Mm.
well. So different things like that. There won't be a jersey patch from what I'm told, but they're going to do a lot more. I'm sure there'll be commercials potentially. So they're going to be doing a lot. But listen, there are a couple players that want different names, right? You've seen Mike Scott, Jaylen Brown vocal about, like, we were given such a small group of names. But again, that was the NBPA that put those names together and agreed upon it with the league. And so there's so many players, it's tough to satisfy them all. But I think for the most part, this is the league just waiting on the players to hear what they want to do and just going from there.
Have you heard about any owners potentially being in trouble financially? Because you think about some of these guys, these teams got super expensive, but some of these guys, they have their money in certain places where, like look at the Houston owner, for example. He's restaurants, casinos, things like that. If you read up about him, he's leveraged himself a couple times, and now a lot of his businesses have gone south, at least for now. Have you heard about any potential upheaval in the owner ranks?
I wouldn't say upheaval, but I mean, Bill, a lot of people, in ownership ranks, they're losing money right now. I mean, as the players took a pay cut, the owners also are losing money. And some of the owners, like in Sacramento, right? I believe they're responsible for that arena. And
Yeah.
so, they are dealing with that. Like, there are financial losses that ownership group, and that's
Well, wait,
beyond
hold
just.
on. Let's talk about what those losses are, because I don't think the average person realizes how big the losses are. You're talking teams are losing somewhere between what, 25 and 40 million basically just this season for all the basketball we've lost?
I mean, I don't know if it's that high. Like, I don't have specific numbers, but
I think it's that high.
that arena, yeah. I mean, that arena's, as far as monthly, every couple months. I mean, that could reach in at least the 10 million range, right? And so, I have heard that arena situation is something that is, one of the things around the league, one of many different ownership groups that are dealing with potential losses. I think that's just the nature of what our country is dealing with right now.
Yeah. It's something that not a lot of people have written about or reported about, and I think it's been underground for the most part, but I think it's gonna be an interesting outcome of this because we haven't for the most part, we haven't had ownership turnover at all the last, I don't know, 8, 9 years. There's only been a couple sales. But you think about the recession in '08. And then the next 2, 3 years after that, remember at one point there was like 10, 11 teams for sale, and we had a bunch of teams change hands and things like that. People are getting out. The values were all over the place. The Philly guys ended up stealing the Sixers. And I'll be interested to see how that plays out too. I want to talk about the reporting, but we're going to take a quick break.
Cool.
All right, we're back. That was easy. All right, so reporting. Now that we're headed toward the bubble, normally you would be on location doing your thing. And that this has been the last decade. This has been the decade of, you know, basically the arms race for breaking stories. Everybody's trying to get information. How fast can you get it out? Stuff like that. You're right in the middle of it. You've broken a ton of stories. How do you break stories in the bubble?
It's a great question. I don't know how much, it'll be interesting to see. This is unprecedented, obviously. So I'll be interested to see how much being inside the bubble, impacts not only access, but different information. But there's not going to be like, Bill, when I try to go and cover games, you try to work on stories, work on different situations, and sometimes get guys alone and
Yeah.
talk to them on the side. That's going to be tough in this type of environment, maybe even impossible.
You won't even
Um,
you won't even be allowed near them, right? I don't see a scenario where you're next to them.
yeah, and so just knowing that, but again, this is the NBA we're talking about. That's really a society right now that we're talking about, where there's this kind of uneasiness. Unless you really know the person or you have an appointment or you have something set up with a person, there's kind of this like uneasiness right now. I think in just society that we're going to have to deal with. Wearing masks and doing things like that. So I don't know how it'll impact reporting. I wish I had an answer for you, but I do think, in terms of access, in terms of like the one-on-ones, after games, trying to get player X alone, or doing things from that standpoint, it's just this world it's not going to be the same. I don't know when, maybe until we get a vaccine or whatever.
The Ringer's Brian Curtis calls it sidling. I think he borrowed that from Mark Stein, but he wrote a piece about it a few years ago about sidling when after games when the reporters sidle up to different guys and try to pull them aside and get the 3, 4 minutes. That era is gone. On the other hand, these guys have way more spare time. Have you
See
heard have you
that
heard more or less from the players in the last 4 months than you did before text and DMs?
There's no question. And one more thing,
More.
Bill, like one more thing. These guys know how to do Zoom interviews now. And they know how to, a lot of them know how to do FaceTimes, do Zoom interviews, do Skype, do like now they've had to master it. So before just even thinking about trying to set up a video interview from home, their schedules are so hectic. It would almost be impossible. But now, I mean, even in the bubble, it might be even easier to get guys on Zoom or get guys doing to do video interviews, than it would be in the past, or even if you're in the bubble. Whereas doing it via digitally is probably the way to go versus in person, face to face.
What is your phone like on the average day? I mean, so you wake up in the morning, you live in the Midwest. Do you already have like 70 texts? Like what walk me through your day. What is your phone like? How many chargers do you have? What
I mean, I'm not that popular. 70 texts to wake up. No, I mean, I think you wake up. I mean, usually have a few, and then you kind of go about your day, and you try to treat every day kind of the same in terms of having dialogue with people across the calendar. And it's something that I've learned going back years and years now. But it's not you know reaching out to people technically when you need them or when you have have a necessity for them. It's just maintaining dialogue over the course of the year and
Yeah.
continue to stay in touch and knowing when there is something that could be going down and just make sure you monitor that. But yeah, I mean, I've always had one phone. I haven't gone the two phone route yet. Have a couple charging cases. Definitely have a lot of chargers. And now that I'm in the house, it's like I don't, when I'm out and about, there are situations where you lose battery, and that's, Bill, like that's the
Yeah.
worst situation to ever be in. But now it's like we're confined to our home, so I haven't dealt with that
I
issue
remember
yet.
Houston All-Star Weekend in '06, and Houston is so spread out, and it was, the BlackBerry era, and it was you were using that BlackBerry almost like it was a car driving to Vegas where you might run out of gas, and you're just
You were
like, "Oh,
cooked. You
man,
were getting cooked down there.
I got 1 bar left, and it's only 10 at night, and I'm 40 minutes from my hotel. I really have to make these last 4 texts matter." And that's
You
it.
were cooked. You were cooked.
Yeah.
That happened to me in LA at All Star Weekend. I think it was a couple of years ago now. But like those parties again on West Coast time, those go
Oh
late.
my god.
In terms of event parties, like those go
Yeah.
late, and so you're kind of bouncing around event to event, and your batteries, and I didn't have a charging case at the time, and I was just bouncing around at night, and it's like by the end of like my phone is damn near dying by the time I'm at the hotel. You're just like hoping it doesn't die. Cause again, there's always stuff going on. There's always things you want to be aware of at
Oh,
different
yeah.
points.
I mean, do you appreciate the moment you're in now? Because you think like 10 years ago, just trying to gain sources and get information is a million times harder. And now you basically have direct access to anyone you want. And these guys know how to work it too. I think if we've learned anything in the last 5, 6 years, it's that the players are really shrewd about who they reach out to, who they have relationships, who they'll text, what they're up to. How do you measure the agendas of the players in this whole thing? Because they're a lot smarter than they were 10 years ago.
No, no question. They're definitely a lot smarter, and you have players right now that are taking control of their own message, and
Yeah.
even beyond just having your own camps or representatives or having the team decide how different things are going to be portrayed. Like a lot of guys are taking it upon themselves to be the ones that drive the message. And I don't know if you want to take that all the way back to the decision in 2010 or how
You
LeBron
can.
handled different things. Yeah, we can definitely. Like I think that was probably the start of it. But I think again, it's just continued to elevate year after year after year. That's what I'm seeing. But to answer like how you started that question, there's no doubt. Like it's been a good kind of it's always good to look back. But again, Bill, it's like I think a lot of people now may look at it and be like, this happened overnight. Sometimes it's easy to see that whether it's the last 2 years, maybe you've been doing something at a certain level, but I'm sure you've noticed or know. I'm like, I've been trying to do this for about 10 years now. So like you said, 9, 10 years. I started in 2010, 11. And so, at that very small, minuscule level, like I
Yeah.
was just trying to break in. And so it's been just day after day of just continuing to try to push through and just lay the groundwork.
Do players fish you for information? Do they ask you what you're hearing? Like almost like they're a fan of the game, wondering what if you know what's going on with stuff?
I mean, tough to answer questions like that. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, you get that from players, from team people, from, all managers, whatever, all
Yeah.
paths of the industry. And especially when the whole, stoppage of play was going down. I remember I got a flurry of text messages from players, from people on the league, like, oh my God, is that real? Did your account get hacked? Like, throughout the whole pandemic, I think even more, there's been a thirst from players, from people around the league, just wanting information, because at the end of the day, there's not much clarity. There's so much
Yeah.
unknown throughout everything that's going on. So I feel like every little bit of information, especially if it's accurate, and I try to be overly accurate. If I'm not like 100 on it, I've missed out on stories because I'm waffling about being 95% or 99%. If I'm not 100, I'm not putting it out. And hopefully that carries on with guys that read my stuff. But there's no doubt, especially in a time like this where there's so much unknown, Bill, I think there definitely was a lot of that.
I think when I think about reporting the last 20 years, I think I probably talked about this before on the pod, but my friend Mark Stein, when he was in Dallas, early internet. I mean, the internet was there. Late '90s, Dirk and Nash show up. and they kind of become his guys. And those are his guys. There's no national reporter that is going to have a better relationship than he has with those two. He's there every day. He's there all the time. Then you think about how it's changed the last 10 years. You can still have the local people or the people who are based in a certain city with a certain team. They can still have those relationships, but it's so much easier for people outside the city to establish a relationship with somebody. And they can, even if it's text DMs, that's what a lot of these guys and most people under 30, like they have a lot of relationships with people that sometimes they've never met or they met them once,
Yeah, I mean,
and
yeah.
and
I think you give that you turn that to social media. Like that's
yeah,
how I
that's what I mean. I think social media has opened the door in a lot of different ways to reporting, and yet at the same time, I feel there's more access, but it's not as good access, A lot of times it's stuff like people like you and even me, like, we can't really use. You have different relationships, but it's not necessarily things like if somebody's bitching about something like, "Oh, that's interesting," but you're not gonna, like, tweet, "So and so told me he's really unhappy with Coach Blank." Um, I think about where we're going the next 10 years. These guys are so much more active, and they're actually can be aggressive sometimes. We've seen with KD where if they don't like a report or they don't like a piece somebody wrote or what somebody said on a podcast, they'll just go at them on Twitter. I don't know where we're going the next 10 years, and we also don't know what innovation is coming either. What's your prediction for athlete media relationships as the next decade goes here?
That's a great question. And by the way, I actually, it's good to see for me. Like I like it when KD wants to try to take, his initiative in terms of wanting to shape, how he feels, try to set things straight. I'm a fan of that. I think all players should do that when they feel. But overall, I think it's going to be a lot of what you talked about in terms of players, taking that upon themselves in terms of how they want their message to be. And I think players are getting smarter and smarter in terms of shaping their message, shaping their narrative.
Yeah.
I wish I had an answer for you as far as like where exactly it's going in terms of athlete relations, but
Well,
I think it's just going to be a lot of that.
the real answer is, and it's a cop out, but we don't really know because we don't know what technological innovations are coming. Like, even think about how Zoom has been a game changer just the last 4 months.
It's
Zoom
crazy. I
was
wish I had
there.
stock in Zoom.
I
To be
know.
honest, I don't know if it's public. I mean, I assume it's a public company, right?
Yeah, it went way up, then it went down, and then it went way back up again. But yeah, there's gonna be more innovations like that. You think like when Twitter happened in '09 and 2010, it was more amusing than anything, and it was a place to get jokes. And then I think the decision made everybody kind of realize, oh shit, this is actually like people are just kind of half reporting stuff. I'm hearing this rumors Miami has moved into the lead, and then really you could the whole course of NBA reporting really starts there for me. We talked about it on pod last week. That was the first time people were reporting stuff that they heard this might happen versus like this is happening, and then it's led to where we are now.
I mean, that's a great example. Another situation that I think was, I don't want to compare it to the decision, but in terms of like speculation and like, how it impacts the league, I think was Kawhi Leonard. Like there
Mm,
was multiple days before July 6th, I believe July 6th is the day, or July 5th, when Kawhi Leonard officially committed. I think it was the 5th or whatever day it was. Like there were and I'm sure, Bill, you heard it, you saw it. There was a day in that the first 4 days where I'm like, I'm sure you spoke to people on league. I spoke to people on league that were saying he's going to the Lakers. It's done. But, again, I didn't say anything about it. I was, I wanted to get the real, when he actually decided and when it was actually set. And so you always hear different things. There's always different rumors and there's always different things being thrown around. But I think that was the only other instance I can think of, at least since I've been, really tracking, news and things like that, where there were so many different scenarios being thrown around. And, one day where you feel like it might be done in a certain area. And then, obviously you let things really play out and you ended up a Clipper.
yeah, I look at stuff like that. It's almost like you're solving a Law and Order episode or something. You're just taking all the information you get and you can hear stuff. And I remember that Kawhi Laker stuff. It was like, look, he's not going back to Toronto. He doesn't want to go back. And at that point, the Clippers, he wasn't going to go by. Everyone was like, he's not going to go there by himself. So technically, it wasn't wrong that he was going to the Lakers because I think that might have been how it played out if they don't make the Paul George trade. I still don't think he goes there by himself. And now you look at it in retrospect, you'd probably rather have SGA and 100,000 picks in Gallinari than Paul George, as good as Paul George is. Like, you think of all the stuff they gave up. If I'm Kawhi, I have a slightly better chance of winning this year, but then all the future stuff. So my point is, the only time I've ever really 100% been sure about something the last 5 years was LeBron going to LA. Because that was one of those things like a year earlier, there were just too
Yeah,
many
we heard it.
signs. There was too many people talking about it, and every single thing that happened was a breadcrumb pointing to this same outcome. And there was no other version where he stayed, I didn't feel like. I honestly felt like that was done for a year, especially when he started buying giant houses here and doing all that stuff. It's like, all right, he's definitely coming. Do you think he finishes his career here? You think the Lakers are the last team he plays for?
That's a great question. I mean, I assume so. I think he's even said on the record he hopes that he can finish out and play out the rest of his career there. I think that's where his mindset's at. But I mean, Bill, we've seen everything at this point, right? And I mean, who
I
knows
don't think you can bet
down the
on it.
road a
Yeah,
year.
I don't think it's bettable because who the hell knows? Who knows? 3 years, his son might get drafted. You know, he might be like a second round
To a
pick on
different team, yeah,
Charlotte. Who
and he
knows?
might, yeah, and he might go there. Like you just don't know. But again, I think when he signed the deal, I think his intent was to finish it out and retire. But we'll see. That's why this playoff run is going to be so important for them in terms of like they put all their eggs in trying to win this year, right? And I know that was the big pitch to Dwight Howard to return. It's like you're a big part of this championship team. Like all chips are to the table. Like they're going for it all this year, and I think in terms of LeBron, his age, everything like that, this year means a lot.
Yeah, you think about the stakes with some of these teams, right? Where Milwaukee, this might be their second to last year with Giannis. Who knows? LeBron, who knows how long he can keep doing this physically? The Clippers, they only really have those guys for 2 years. There's an urgency now with some of these situations that, just didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. You think like the '08 Celtics, if they didn't win the title that year, they were still going to have a bunch, 3, 4 more years of taking cracks at it. And this year, it really feels like everybody's on a 2-year window now. Even Philly. If Philly lost in round one, would you be shocked if they blew it up and got rid of one of those guys? I wouldn't be shocked.
See, I would be shocked for one reason because those two guys are still so young and obviously under contract for so long. I feel like there's other changes you can make, especially in
Hmm.
a climate like this where you just don't know the salary cap and free agency. A lot of these players with options, like let's be honest, they're gonna be opting in because the money is just not gonna be there at the highest
It's a
level,
good point.
especially at the salary that a lot of these guys are. You saw Drummond, a day, I think a day or two after the season was announced back, he went on record saying he's opting in. Like it was that quick, and his date isn't even until October. So I think
Right.
that mindset resonates through a lot of different players around the league that have options, that understand what the financial outcome will be. So I think you have to take all that into factor, especially with a team like Philly. You have two young guys that are already locked in that do have a ton of upside and potential. I think they can make other moves around the fringes, whether that be roster, coaching, etc., before you get rid of two very, very explosive talents like that.
All right, we'll have to bet on that. I feel like that. I feel like if they have a bad ending in this bubble playoffs, I wouldn't be shocked if something major happened.
Hopefully we can bet at dinner, Bill, and at some point
Yeah,
that
it'd be
can
nice if we
happen
could have dinner
in
in
the
the next 7
pandemic.
years. Yeah. Did you get the shakes around June 28th, 2 weeks ago, when the July 1st is coming and it's going to be this complete whirlwind? And yet, I didn't even realize. I saw on my iPhone. I looked in it, and I was looking to see what time it was, and I saw the 6:30, and it kind of startled me for a second. I'm like, 6:30. That means something. And I had like this 3 seconds, and I'm like, "Oh, this is usually the day when all hell is breaking loose." And it was just another
Not this year.
quiet day.
Not this year. I mean, what did we see that week? Like Corey Brewer signed a deal with the Kings. Like you saw, I guess there was free agency theoretically, Bill. I think there was to a degree, but yeah, that was was tough. It was tough, but it's a different world. So just I guess prep for October.
Well, conceivably, we could have this bubble playoffs, immediately go into the draft, immediately go into free agency. This might be the biggest whirlwind we've had for the league probably since, at least since the 11-12 when we went from no season to all of a sudden in December 2011, there's a million things happening. Sprint to the end, then the draft, free agency, all crammed into like 8 months. This would be even a nuttier version of that.
It's a whirlwind, and I know players. I mean, they look at it, and the layoff that's going to occur between the end of the season, the finals. Imagine that finals team, right? You're winning or losing both finals teams in mid October, and you're supposed to turn around a month later, potentially go to a training camp. Like it's going to be hell in a lot of ways. It's going to
Yeah,
be tough.
that's makes me think that Christmas is a little unrealistic. I know they've sketched all of it out, but I wouldn't be surprised if that stretched to January to try to at least give the finals teams. Because the other thing, I know people have talked about this, but the actual playoffs of just every other day these guys are gonna be playing, we don't know physically how that's gonna impact some of these older guys too. I'm worried about that. I do think that's gonna be taxing.
One thing though that I have thought about, and it's my theory, is that like in a lot of ways, this little layoff that we're having right now for these players that are going to be playing in the playoffs and the regular season and whatnot, seeding games, like this has been a mini off season for a lot of these guys. At least a
True.
month in, like they got off. 2 months, some players said we didn't do anything, really work out playing basketball. We just did some light conditioning. Like this was a small off season for them. So I don't know if the NBA is going to use that as like a carrot. Like, listen, you guys are going to get 1 or 2 months in the real off season, but you also had 3 months in on the front end. So there's a lot of different ways you can slice it, but this is a lot of time. I saw a stat. I remember when it was announced that the NBA approved the plan. It was like from the start of the season to the hiatus or the March 11th date was the exact time, March 11th to what July 30 will be, as far
Oh,
as like the,
wow.
the number of days. I think it was like, actually, I don't even want to guess. I don't want to throw a date out there, but there was like a
Yeah.
number of days and it like matched up perfectly. And so they basically, they're going to be put in a tough position.
Shams, don't be a stranger. This was a pleasure. We'll check you out in the Athletic and on Stadium. You're going to the bubble, right? You're going in there?
I will go there eventually.
All right. Good luck. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.